The metal doors of Combat Training Room 7 slid open with a soft hiss, and 23 cadets from across the galaxy filed inside. The room was plain and boring, with gray walls and bright white lights that made everything look cold. Simple metal desks sat in neat rows, each one paired with a basic polymer chair. Window blinds hung along one wall, and a few broken tiles lay scattered in the corner where maintenance had been working earlier that week. James Mitchell walked in with the others, his brown hair still messy from the morning rush. He was the only human in advanced combat theory, and he felt it every day. The other students were impressive in ways that made him feel small. There was Toei, whose thick green skin could stop a knife blade. Next to him sat Zilare, whose crystal body could generate enough electrical energy to power a small vehicle. The serpentine Velhan could spit acid that dissolved metal in seconds. James found his usual seat in the back corner and tried to make himself invisible. Being human at the Galactic Military Academy meant being the weak one, the slow one, the one without any special powers. His species had no natural weapons, no armor-like skin, no ability to breathe fire or red minds. Humans were just ordinary, and ordinary did not impress anyone here. The instructor entered last, and the room fell silent immediately. Vextal was 7 feet tall and covered in dark blue scales that shimmered under the harsh lights. Her 4 yellow eyes could look in different directions at once, and her powerful tail scraped against the floor as she moved. She had fought in 3 galactic wars and survived battles that destroyed entire fleets. Everyone respected her, and everyone feared her just a little bit. "Cadets," she said, her voice deep and commanding. "Today we will not be reading about combat theory from your data tablets. Today you will show me what your species brings to the battlefield." A few students sat up straighter, excited by the change in routine. Combat demonstrations were rare in academic classes, usually saved for the practical training sessions in the gymnasium. James felt his stomach tighten with worry. He knew where this was heading, and he did not like it. Instructor Vextal walked slowly between the rows of desks, her claws clicking against the metal floor. "Each of you will demonstrate your species' natural combat abilities. You may use only what you find in this classroom. No weapons from outside, no technology beyond what sits before you right now." Toei grinned and flexed his massive arms. Bone spikes pushed through his green skin like knives erupting from his flesh. They were sharp enough to cut through steel, and strong enough to punch through armor. The other students murmured with appreciation. "Excellent," the instructor said. "Cadet Ziller, you next." The crystal being stood gracefully, her transparent body catching the light like a prism. Energy began to build between her hands, crackling and sparking until the air around her glowed bright blue. The power dancing between her fingers could have melted the metal desks in seconds. Several cadets leaned back instinctively, knowing how dangerous her species could be when angry. One by one, the alien students showed their natural gifts. Velhan demonstrated his acid spit by dissolving a piece of scrap metal. Kyaven revealed the poisonous barbs hidden in her wrists. Others showed abilities that humans could barely imagine, telepathic attacks that could scramble an enemy's thoughts, or the ability to change their skin to match their surroundings perfectly. James watched it all with growing dread. Every species in the room had evolved some kind of weapon or defense over millions of years. They were living arsenals, born ready for war. What did humans have? Soft skin that bruised easily. Weak muscles compared to most galactic species. No natural weapons at all. "Cadet Mitchell," Instructor Vextal's voice cut through his worried thoughts. "Your turn." The room went quiet, and James felt every eye turned toward him. Some of his classmates looked curious, but others were already smirking. They expected him to fail, and fail badly. What could a human possibly do that would impress anyone here? James stood slowly, his legs feeling shaky. He looked around the plain classroom, taking in every detail. The metal desks bolted to the floor. The plastic chairs that could be moved around. The synthetic cord that held up the window blinds. The broken ceramic tiles near the wall. The supply drawer built into each desk, containing basic tools like metal styluses for writing and small cutting implements for opening packages. "Well?" Toei called out with amusement in his voice. "Are you going to show us your terrible human fangs?" A few students laughed, but James ignored them. He was thinking, his mind working differently than theirs. While they saw furniture and classroom supplies, he was beginning to see something else entirely. His hands moved to the nearest desk, fingers tracing along the joints where different pieces connected. The laughter died away as the other students watched him work. They did not understand what he was doing, and that made them uncomfortable. James Mitchell might not have claws or acid or electrical powers, but there was something in his careful, methodical movements that suggested they had all made a very big mistake. James Mitchell knelt beside the metal desk, his fingers exploring every joint and connection point. The other cadets watched with growing confusion as he began to work on the chair beside it. His movements were careful and precise, like someone who had done this kind of work many times before. "What is the human doing?" whispered Zilla to her neighbor. Her crystal body sparkled with curiosity as she leaned forward to get a better look. James found the connection point where the chair leg met the seat. The polymer rod was flexible but strong, designed to bend slightly under weight without breaking. He worked at the metal joint with his small cutting tool, loosening the screws that held everything together. The work was slow and methodical, and some of the alien students began to fidget with impatience. Toeke laughed loudly. "Is he building a new chair? Maybe humans fight by making furniture at their enemies." More laughter rippled through the room, but James did not look up from his work. He had heard jokes like this every day since arriving at the academy. Let them laugh now, he thought. They would not be laughing for long. The chair leg came free with a soft pop. James held it up, testing its weight and flexibility. It was about 3 feet long, with a natural curve that made it bend like a spring when pressure was applied. Perfect for what he had in mind. Next, he moved to the window blinds. The synthetic cord that controlled them was strong and lightweight, designed to last for years without breaking. James cut several long pieces, testing each one by pulling it tight between his hands. The material stretched slightly under pressure but held firm. It would work. "Instructor Vextal," called out Velhan, his serpentine body coiled with irritation. "How long must we wait for the human to finish playing with classroom supplies?" The tall instructor said nothing, but her 4 yellow eyes were fixed on James with growing interest. She had commanded soldiers from dozens of species, and she recognized focused preparation when she saw it. The human was not playing. He was working toward something specific, something he had planned from the moment he looked around the room. James moved to the corner where the broken ceramic tiles lay scattered. Maintenance had been replacing damaged wall panels earlier that week, leaving behind sharp fragments of various sizes. He selected several pieces, each about the size of his thumb, and began shaping them with his cutting tool. The scraping sound of metal against ceramic filled the quiet room. James worked each fragment carefully, creating sharp points and edges. His hands moved with the confidence of someone who had done similar work before, though none of his classmates could imagine when or why a human would need such skills. "This is ridiculous," muttered Kyn, her poisonous barbs twitching with annoyance. "We are warriors, not craftsmen. What is the point of this demonstration?" But Instructor Vextal held up one clawed hand for silence. She was beginning to understand something about humans that she had never considered before. While other species had evolved natural weapons over millions of years, humans had learned to create weapons from their environment. It was a different kind of evolution, one that happened in the mind rather than the body. James gathered his materials on his desk. The flexible chair leg, the synthetic cord, and several sharp ceramic points that he had somehow attached to metal styluses from the supply drawer. He began connecting the pieces together, wrapping the cord around the ends of the chair leg with careful, practiced knots. The room grew quieter as more students realized that something unusual was happening. Whatever James was building, it was not random or pointless. Every piece had been chosen for a reason, every connection made with purpose. "It looks like..." Zilla started to say, then stopped. Her crystalline features showed confusion and something that might have been respect. "It looks like an ancient projectile weapon." James tested the tension of his cord, pulling it back and releasing it with a soft twang. The sound echoed in the quiet classroom like a challenge. He made small adjustments, tightening some knots and loosening others until the balance felt exactly right in his hands. The weapon was crude by modern standards, built from classroom furniture and scraps. But there was something about the way James held it that made even the largest and strongest cadets feel suddenly nervous. His brown eyes had changed, becoming sharp and focused in a way that reminded everyone present that humans had once been predators on their home world. "Impossible," breathed Toreke, his bone spikes retracting slightly. "That is just broken furniture." James selected one of his ceramic-tipped arrows and placed it against the cord. His stance shifted naturally into something that looked both relaxed and deadly. Generations of human instinct flowed through his movements as he raised the improvised weapon and drew back the string. The classroom held its breath. Even Instructor Vextal leaned forward slightly, her tail curling with anticipation. In all her years of training soldiers, she had never seen anything quite like this. The human had entered an empty room and somehow armed himself with nothing but creativity and determination. James aimed at the practice dummy on the far side of the room, 20 meters away. His breathing slowed, his hands steady as stone. Around him, 22 alien cadets waited to see if furniture could really become a weapon in human hands. The bowstring stretched taut in James Mitchell's grip, the synthetic cord humming with tension. His left hand held the improvised weapon steady while his right pulled the ceramic-tipped arrow back to his cheek. The classroom was so quiet that everyone could hear the soft creak of the flexible chair leg bending under pressure. 22 alien cadets watched with a mixture of curiosity and doubt. They had seen their human classmate build something from broken furniture, but none of them truly believed it would work. How could scraps of polymer and ceramic compete with evolution's gifts of fang and claw? Instructor Vextal stood motionless, her 4 yellow eyes locked on James. In her long military career, she had witnessed countless weapons demonstrations. Energy blasters that could melt through starship hulls. Plasma cannons that turned mountains to glass. But she had never seen anyone try to fight with classroom supplies. James breathed in slowly, his brown eyes fixed on the practice dummy across the room. The target was 20 meters away, made of reinforced polymer designed to withstand military-grade weapons testing. Its humanoid shape was marked with scoring zones that showed where different types of damage would be most effective in real combat. The human stance was strange to alien eyes. His feet were positioned shoulder-width apart, his body turned slightly sideways to present a smaller target to imaginary enemies. His drawing arm was rock-steady, muscles tense but controlled. There was something ancient and primal in his posture, as if he was channeling instincts that went back thousands of years. "This is taking too long," complained Velhan, his serpentine body coiled with impatience. "Just shoot the thing so we can move on to real demonstrations." But James did not rush. He made tiny adjustments to his aim, accounting for distance and the slight curve of his makeshift arrow. His breathing slowed to a steady rhythm. In, hold, out. In, hold, out. The chaos of the classroom faded away until only he and the target existed. The release was smooth and sudden. The bowstring snapped forward with a sharp twang that cracked through the air like a whip. The ceramic-tipped arrow flew across the room faster than most of the alien students could follow, its flight path straight and true. The impact was devastating. The improvised projectile punched through the reinforced polymer dummy with a sound like breaking glass. The force drove it completely through the target's center mass, and the arrow buried itself in the metal wall behind with a ringing clang that made several cadets jump. For a moment, nobody moved. The alien students stared at the hole in the practice dummy, trying to process what they had just witnessed. The opening was perfectly round and went straight through materials that should have stopped primitive projectiles cold. "Lucky shot," muttered Toreke, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. His bone spikes had retracted completely, and his green skin had taken on a pale tinge. James said nothing. He simply selected his second arrow and knocked it against the bowstring. This time his movements were faster, more fluid. The careful preparation was over, and now pure instinct took control. The second arrow followed the first so quickly that some cadets missed the shot entirely. It struck just inches from the original hole, punching through the dummy's chest with the same deadly precision. Before the echoes of impact had faded, James was already drawing his third shot. 5 arrows in less than 30 seconds, each one finding its mark with mechanical accuracy. The practice dummy now looked like it had been attacked by a military drill, its center section perforated with perfectly round holes that formed a tight grouping around the vital area. The silence that followed was different from before. It was not the quiet of waiting or curiosity, but the stunned hush of beings who had just witnessed something that challenged everything they thought they knew about combat. Instructor Vextal approached the destroyed target, her claws clicking against the metal floor. She examined each hole carefully, running one finger around the edges where ceramic points had punched through reinforced polymer. The penetration was clean and deep, the kind of damage that would have been instantly fatal to any living creature. "How?" she asked, turning back to face James. Her voice carried none of its usual authority, only genuine bewilderment. James lowered his improvised bow and shrugged, as if what he had just done was perfectly normal. "You asked for a demonstration of human combat capabilities. This is what humans do." Zilea Ray's crystal body flickered with nervous energy. But it was just furniture. Broken classroom furniture. "And now it is a weapon," James replied simply. He gestured toward his makeshift bow. "Humans do not have acid spit or bone spikes or electrical powers. We have something else instead." "What?" asked Kyaven, her poisonous barbs twitching with her knees. James looked around the room, his gaze taking in every desk, chair, and supply drawer. When he spoke again, his voice was calm but somehow threatening. We have the ability to turn anything into a weapon. Any environment becomes our army. Any object becomes a tool for survival. The alien students followed his gaze, suddenly seeing their familiar classroom in an entirely new light. Every piece of furniture now looked potentially dangerous. Every supply drawer might contain the components for another improvised weapon. They had come to class expecting to see the weak human fail. Instead, they had learned that there was no such thing as an unarmed human. The silence stretched like a taut wire as every alien eye in the room stared at the destroyed practice dummy. 5 perfect holes punched through reinforced polymer that was designed to stop military weapons. Instructor Vextal pulled one of the ceramic-tipped arrows from the wall, turning it over in her scaled hands with something approaching reverence. "Explain this," she commanded, but her voice lacked its usual harsh edge. For the first time since James had known her, the legendary Keltharian warrior sounded uncertain. James set his improvised bow on the desk and looked around at his classmates. Their faces showed confusion, fear, and a dawning respect that had not been there an hour earlier. Toreke's green skin had gone pale, and his bone spikes remained fully retracted. Zileare's crystal body flickered with nervous energy, casting dancing lights across the walls. "My species did not evolve claws," James began, his voice steady and matter-of-fact. "We have no acid glands, no electrical organs, no natural armor. When the first humans walked across Earth, we were surrounded by creatures that could kill us easily. Saber-toothed cats with fangs longer than my hand. Bears that weighed as much as a small vehicle. Wolves that hunted in coordinated packs." He picked up a chair and demonstrated how its metal leg could be removed. "So we learned to make tools. A sharp rock became a cutting edge. A straight branch became a spear. Animal sinew became bowstring." He showed them how the chair back could serve as a shield, how its components could be reshaped into different weapons. "But that was thousands of years ago," protested Velhan, his serpentine body coiled tightly with anxiety. "Surely modern humans have moved beyond such primitive methods." James smiled, and something in that expression made several cadets lean back in their seats. "Have we? Look around this room and tell me what you see." The alien students glanced nervously at their surroundings. What had seemed like a simple classroom an hour ago now felt different, charged with potential danger. "I see 23 desks," James continued, walking between the rows. "Each desk leg can become a club or spear shaft. Each metal joint can be sharpened into a blade." He moved to the windows. "I see synthetic cord that makes excellent snares or garrotes. I see ceramic tiles that become cutting tools or projectile points." He opened a supply drawer and pulled out various items. Metal styluses that can be thrown or used to puncture. Cutting tools that need only minor modification to become weapons. Polymer strips that bind or strangle. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, demonstrating possibilities that made his audience increasingly uncomfortable. "You see weapons everywhere," whispered Kyaven, her poisonous barbs twitching. "Not weapons," James corrected. "Resources. Materials that become weapons when necessary. It is how humans think. We look at any environment and ask ourselves, how do I survive here? How do I defend myself? How do I hunt?" Instructor Vextal studied the crude arrow in her hands with new understanding. "Your species weaponizes its environment." "Every environment," James confirmed. "Desert, forest, Arctic wasteland, deep ocean, even the vacuum of space. Humans adapt. We take whatever is available and turn it into what we need. Food, shelter, tools, weapons. There is no place we cannot survive, given time to think." The implications of this statement settled over the classroom like a heavy blanket. These alien cadets came from species that had evolved specific advantages over millions of years. They were perfectly adapted to their home environments but struggled when conditions changed. Humans, apparently, adapted to any condition by changing their tools instead of their bodies. "On my home world," James continued, "human children learn to make fire from sticks, shelters from branches, weapons from stones. We call it camping, and we do it for fun. What you consider survival skills, we teach as recreation." Toeke found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "How many of you are there? How many humans?" "Billions," James replied simply. "Spread across dozens of worlds, each one different from Earth. Humans living underwater in bubble cities. Humans mining asteroids in deep space. Humans farming on planets where the air would poison most species. We adapt. We survive. We multiply." The room fell silent again as the alien cadets contemplated this revelation. They had dismissed humans as weak, soft, unspecialized. Now they were beginning to understand that what they had mistaken for weakness was actually the most terrifying strength imaginable: unlimited adaptability. Zilea Ray's crystal form pulsed with agitation. But why? Why did evolution make your species this way? James looked at her with something that might have been pity. Evolution did not make us this way. We made ourselves this way. Every generation of humans has faced new challenges, new environments, new threats. Those who could adapt survived. Those who could not died. After millions of years of this process, you get a species that can turn classroom furniture into weapons. He gestured toward his makeshift bow. This is not special training or advanced technology. This is basic human instinct. Put any human in any room, anywhere in the galaxy, and they will figure out how to arm themselves. It is what we do. Instructor Vextal slowly placed the arrow on her desk, handling it like it might explode. She had commanded troops in 3 galactic wars, but she had never encountered anything quite like this revelation about humanity's true nature. Instructor Vextal stood before her class with a gravity that had not been there at the beginning of the lesson. Her 4 yellow eyes swept across the alien cadets, noting how they now sat differently in their chairs. Where before they had been confident and relaxed, now there was tension in their postures. They kept glancing at James Mitchell, then at the objects around them, as if seeing everything for the first time. The tall Keltharian warrior picked up the improvised bow from James's desk, handling it with the respect she would show to any dangerous weapon. The crude construction of polymer and cord looked harmless enough, but the destroyed practice dummy across the room told a different story. "Observe what has happened here today," she began, her deep voice carrying to every corner of the room. "When this class began, you looked at Cadet Mitchell and saw the weakest member of our group. A species with no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities. You were wrong." Several cadets shifted uncomfortably. Toeke's bone spikes remained completely retracted, and his green skin had not returned to its normal color. The massive warrior who had mocked James an hour earlier now avoided meeting the human's eyes. "While your species spent millions of years evolving specialized weapons through biology, humans developed something far more dangerous," the instructor continued. "They learned to evolve their weapons through thought. Through creativity. Through the simple ability to look at any object and imagine its potential." She gestured toward the holes in the practice dummy. Cadet Mitchell entered this room empty-handed. Within minutes, he was armed with a weapon capable of lethal force. He did not bring this weapon with him. He did not requisition it from our army. He created it from furniture that every one of you had seen and ignored. Zilea Ray's crystal body flickered nervously. "But surely this is rare among humans. Special training, perhaps." James shook his head. "My father taught me to make a bow when I was 8 years old. We used a branch from our backyard tree and string from my mother's sewing box. Most human children learn similar skills. We call them hobbies." The word hobbies seemed to hit the alien students like a physical blow. What they had just witnessed as an impossible demonstration of combat adaptation was, to humans, a childhood pastime. "This changes everything," whispered Velhan, his serpentine body coiled so tightly it looked painful. "Every human is potentially armed, all the time, everywhere they go." Instructor Vextal nodded grimly. "Exactly. And this is why humanity has become such a valuable member of our galactic alliance. Not because of their technology, though that is impressive. Not because of their ships, though they build good ones. Because of their minds." She walked slowly between the rows of desks, her claws clicking against the metal floor. "Put a Thraxian warrior in an empty room, and he has his bone spikes. Put a Velhan in the same room, and she has her acid spit. Put a human in that room, and suddenly the room itself becomes a weapon." James quietly began disassembling his bow, returning each component to its original purpose. The chair leg went back to being part of a chair. The synthetic cord was wound up neatly. The ceramic points were set aside to be disposed of properly. His movements were calm and methodical, as if he had not just revolutionized his classmates' understanding of combat theory. "This demonstration will become required study material for all advanced combat courses," the instructor announced. "I want every cadet in this academy to understand what they are fighting alongside when they serve with humans. A species that can weaponize furniture will find a way to weaponize anything." She paused at James's desk, looking down at the ordinary classroom supplies he had transformed into instruments of war. "Tell me, Cadet Mitchell, what other items in this room could serve as weapons?" James looked around casually, his brown eyes cataloging possibilities. The metal desk frames make excellent spears when separated from their tops. The plastic chairs can be broken into sharp fragments for throwing. The light fixtures contain focusing lenses that could start fires. The door hinges could be removed and sharpened into blades. With each item he mentioned, more alien students looked around nervously. What had been a safe, familiar classroom was now revealed as a potential army filled with dozens of improvised weapons. The floor tiles could be pried up and used as shields or thrown like discus, James continued matter-of-factly. The ventilation grates contain metal mesh that makes good cutting edges. Even the wall panels could be removed and shaped into larger weapons if needed. "Stop," said KYFN, her voice barely audible. "Please stop." But James was not finished. "Of course, that is just this room. A human can adapt to any environment. Desert sand becomes glass weapons when heated. Ice becomes blades when shaped properly. Even in the vacuum of space, a human will find ways to use zero gravity and momentum as weapons." The silence that followed was profound. 22 alien cadets sat in stunned comprehension of what they had learned. The species they had dismissed as weak and helpless was actually the most dangerous in the galaxy, not despite their lack of natural weapons, but because of it. Instructor Vextal made notes on her data tablet, already planning to recommend James Mitchell for advanced tactical training. After today's lesson, she understood that humans were not the galaxy's weakest allies. They were its most unpredictable and resourceful advantage, capable of turning any situation to their benefit through pure creative thinking.